somewhere at a gas station. You'll see the numerous text messages that Mr. Ferlazzo sends to Emily over Emily's phone over the weekend. The same phone that he turned off and put in a bag and threw away. From Saturday at 1 o'clock until Monday at 10:30 in the morning, he sends 16 text messages to her phone, asking where she is, asking her to come back, getting angry with her for not answering his calls or his text, and eventually telling her that he doesn't deserve this shit. You'll hear testimony from the medical examiner about how Emily's body was dismembered after she was killed with a serrated tool like a handsaw. You'll also hear that Emily's body was stabbed 18 times after she was killed. 1 stab to her chest, hitting her heart, 8 stabs to her abdomen, 9 stabs to her back. The medical examiner will tell you that these were stab wounds, not slicing wounds. And you'll hear Mr. Ferlazzo admit to cutting up Emily's body with a saw, putting it in garbage bags, and how he intended to bring her body into the woods and discard it. You'll hear how he greets his sister on Saturday morning after killing Emily with a text and says, "I just made some coffee. I can bring you some." He takes a shower at her Airbnb. They go to breakfast. When his sister asks where Emily is, he says she's sleeping. They have breakfast, he eats, he drinks a mimosa. They make plans to go to St. Albans, where another friend of his lives. He gives his sister a tattoo. They go out to dinner that night in St. Albans. On Sunday, he meets his sister for brunch here in Burlington. They hang out. He goes back to his friend's house in St. Albans, hangs out at a bonfire. You will hear testimony from an individual who was at that bonfire, an off-duty police officer, who will say that Mr. Ferlazzo was acting like a normal person and taking hits off a marijuana bomb at the bonfire. During that bonfire, he doesn't say anything to any of his friends or this off-duty police officer about what happened, or that he felt he had no other option but to kill Emily, or that he made a horrible mistake. The evidence will show that he began executing his plan to get rid of Emily's body. He cuts her up using a saw. He puts her body in trash bags. The evidence will show that in order to bring those trash bags into the woods to discard them, he needed to go to New Hampshire and get his Jeep. He drove his motorcycle that was stored at his friend's house in St. Albans 3 hours to his in-laws' house in New Hampshire where his Jeep was. When they ask him, "Where's Emily?" he says, "We got into a fight and she left on Saturday." He doesn't know where she is. His in-laws then report Emily missing. When the police call to speak to Mr. Ferlazzo about his missing wife, Mr. Ferlazzo tells the trooper the made-up story about how Emily went missing on Saturday, somewhere in Bolton, and the police ask him where his van is. Mr. Ferlazzo lies to the police and tells them that the van's not running well and that it is at an auto shop. He tells them that that auto shop is in Virgins. The evidence will show that this is when Mr. Ferlazzo's cover-up starts unraveling. The evidence will show that before Mr. Ferlazzo left his in-laws' home in St. Albans, they convinced him to turn on location sharing services on his phone. He started driving from New Hampshire back to Vermont around 8:15 on Monday night. On the way, he texts a friend who lives in Enosburg and says that he's going to be showing up at his house on Monday night at 11:20. While Mr. Ferlazzo is driving from New Hampshire to Vermont, police learn that the van is not in Virgins, and they locate the van in St. Albans. And they post a couple of troopers outside of the van. Mr. Ferlazzo eventually arrives at his friend's house in Enosburg. They hop in his friend's car because Mr. Ferlazzo has said, "I need a ride to go get my van." As they're driving and getting close to where the van is parked at his friend's house in St. Albans, they start to see troopers. Mr. Ferlazzo tells his friend to turn around. His friend confronts him about what's going on, asking him if those troopers are for him. Mr. Ferlazzo tells his friend the police are looking for Emily, that she's in the van, that she's not alive, and that he shot her. When his friend attempts to kick him out of his car, Mr. Ferlazzo starts panicking, acting like he's going to jump out of the car, asks his friend to shoot him, and says he can't go to prison. His friend calls 911 as Mr. Ferlazzo walks off into the woods. You'll hear about how after that 911 call, the police start looking for Mr. Ferlazzo. And you'll hear that about 14 hours later, a detective from the Vermont State Police was at the Maple Fields in St. Albans. You'll hear about her seeing Mr. Ferlazzo getting a drink out of the cooler at the Maple Fields. And you'll hear about Mr. Ferlazzo being approached by the troopers, and that trooper will describe that Mr. Ferlazzo appeared deflated and looked like he had given up. She brought him back to the station, and he sat down with detectives for an interview. 42 seconds into the interview, he confesses to shooting Emily. You will hear that confession, and you will see how detailed, thoughtful, and thorough his conversation is. He has time to think about what he's going to say. He's given numerous breaks. He has time to contemplate. He has time to change his story or correct inaccuracies. At no point during his statement will you ever hear him say that he thought Emily was going to kill him, hurt him, or that she posed any threat to him. In fact, at numerous points during his statement, you will hear him talk about how angry he was with her and how he wanted to stop her and how he made a decision. As you're taking in all of the evidence over the next couple of days, I want you to pay close attention to what you hear and also what you don't hear. You won't hear or see any evidence that indicates that this was a lawful or justified killing. You won't see any evidence that indicates that Emily posed a threat to him. You won't see any evidence that indicates that Mr. Ferlazzo couldn't make decisions, couldn't think straight, couldn't form intent to kill. In fact, you'll hear the opposite. After all the evidence is presented, Judge Pack will read you the law. You'll read instructions on the essential elements of the offense and provide definitions of those legal terms. You will be asked to decide whether the state has met its burden of proving these essential elements beyond a reasonable doubt, and we are confident that we can and will meet that burden. The state will meet its burden and show beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Ferlazzo was the person who committed this offense, that Mr. Ferlazzo caused the death of his wife, Emily Ferlazzo, that Mr. Ferlazzo's killing of Emily was unlawful, meaning there was no legal justification for it, that he intended to kill Emily, meaning it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't an accident, that he acted willfully, that he acted deliberately, and that he acted with premeditation. And we believe that this evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt to every single one of you serving on this jury that Mr. Ferlazzo is guilty of the unlawful, intentional, willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing of Emily. And we will be asking you to return a verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Ms. Jantz, do you wish to make an opening?
Yes, Judge, I do. Thank you. That's it. You're dead. That's it. You're dead. That's what Joseph Ferlazzo now remembers hearing Emily say to him, and then seeing her start to pull her pistol out from under her pillow, because these are people who slept with their guns under their pillows. He was afraid for his life, believed she was going to shoot and kill him. That's it, you're dead, she said to him. And he shot her twice in the head. This weekend, prior to this weekend, they had been living with her parents in New Hampshire for about a month.
You can't,
You can't hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
I apologize.
if you want to put the,
I'll just move this up.
yeah.
They'd been refitting a camper to turn it into a residence. They actually had a name for it, Roaming Rosie. You'll hear him testify. And it was something they planned to go cross-country up and down the East Coast. This weekend was a trip to Vermont to celebrate their one-year anniversary and to spend time with his sister Nikki, who he hadn't seen in years. His sister rented an Airbnb in Bolton, and they parked their camper in the parking lot of the Airbnb in Bolton. The drive up here from New Hampshire was great. They were both in a good mood. Mr. Ferlazzo, Joseph, was looking forward to spending time with his sister, and Emily seemed to be in a good mood. He will tell you, the minute they parked, it was like a switch flipped, and she started complaining. F this, F you, F your family, I don't want to be here, I'm going to destroy your life. And that just went on and on and on. That was late in the afternoon, I believe, on Friday the 16th. Mr. Ferlazzo did contact his sister. They made arrangements to meet. He did meet with his sister and her boyfriend. Emily was quiet, and when they got back to the camper from seeing his sister, she started again. He put on some he lit some candles because there was, he wanted to have candlelight. She didn't like it. Put those candles out. He did. She grabbed the big Yankee candle and started hitting him with it. Head, neck, shoulders, torso. He took the candle from her, but that didn't stop her. She continued kicking him, punching him all over his body. He will tell you he grabbed her arms and say, hey, you stay in your space, I'll stay in mine. This is not acceptable. And he took his dog Remy out for a walk. He came back, she was lying down in bed, and you will see pictures of their camper. It's really small. The way the bed is arranged is that it's flush against the back of the camper. His side of the bed was against the back of the camper. Her side was closer to the inside of the camper. In order to get into his side of the bed, he had to climb across her. So he comes back in, and she's still grumbling and mumbling, and I don't want to do this, F you, all over the place. And he starts climbing across her to get into bed. As he does, so she's lying on her stomach, face to the left, right arm under her pillow. She takes her elbow and smashes it into his groin. She does say something like, what the fuck? Smashes her elbow into his groin. He picks up the pillow and throws it on her head. That's when she says, that's it, you're dead. Starts to raise up, starts to pull out the gun. He, of course, has his gun in his hand, because that's what these two people did. They believed they needed to sleep with their guns for self-protection. He already had his Glock in his hand. He saw her hand start to move out from under the pillow, and he shot her twice and killed her. That's not in dispute. What happened is not in dispute. It's why it happened. After he shot her, he really was in a state of panic and shock. He will tell you he loved his wife. This is hardly something that on the weekend they were celebrating their anniversary he planned or intended or wanted. He did not want this. You will hear how he sat by her bedside, just in panic and not knowing what to do. He did go to, just as the state told you, he went to meet his sister for breakfast. He carried on for the rest of the weekend as normally as he could. And he did a pretty good job of it in that he lied repeatedly, and he will admit that. He lied to everyone he came in contact with about what happened to Emily. His explanations are varied. He says, I was sleep deprived, I was intoxicated, I was in shock. He will tell you that even now, his memory of what happened is fragmented, coming to him in bits and pieces. It is true that he told the police nothing about what I've just described to you, and that it was weeks later that it began coming back to him in the form of nightmares, that he could see her pulling the gun out to shoot him. You, as finders of fact, will have to decide what you think is true and what isn't true. But there's not much that's in dispute about what happened. He will explain to you the reasons for the stab wounds and the dismemberment. But the truth is that he himself he's trying to put all the pieces together. And what he knows for sure is that he shot her in self-defense because he believed at the time that she was going to kill him. And it will be up to you. Let me just make sure I didn't forget anything before I ask you to find not guilty. Yep. Yep. It'll be up to you to decide what you believe is true and what isn't true. Is he just making up a story now to get away with it? Or is there more to the story than what the state would have you believe? We think once you've heard all the evidence, including hearing from Mr. Ferlazzo about what happened, that you will believe Joseph and acquit him of the charge of first-degree murder. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jantz. Is the state ready with its first witness?
We are, Judge. We just need to get her.
Yep. So I think we were going to take a 5-minute break here. We don't usually take breaks this quickly, but since the first witness is, do we need?
No, I think the court needed to, I think we should take a break, Judge.
Okay, then we will take a 5-minute break just to set up the first witness. First witness, by agreement of the parties, will be conducted through WebEx on the screen. So that will take just a couple of minutes to set up, and we'll be back with you shortly.
All right.